Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us today for our virtual discussion on future-proofing the data strategy. My name is Shaumin Ghosh. I'm assistant editor at the Economic Times CIO, and I'm delighted to be your moderator for this discussion. Now, businesses today are racing to personal, high-performing, and adaptive applications powered by generative AI. With digital changing rapidly, organizations need to continuously think of ways to keep pace and perhaps lead the way in that space. But that's easier said than done. Given the volume, velocity, and variety of data, both structured and unstructured, in addition to the risks posed by data poisoning and the constraints of keeping operating costs to a minimum, future-proofing the data strategy is a top prerogative for CIOs and CISOs in the enterprise segment today. In today's discussion, we're going to be talking about the role of data in the modern enterprise, the challenges posed by data sprawls, the impact of data poisoning and data hallucination, key performance indicators on data management, and of course, achieving lower TCO and streamlining data management. Joining me today for the discussion are Nehal Shah, the Deputy CTO at IDBI Bank. Nehal, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Ovi.
We've got Sreeni Venugopal. He's the CIO and CISO at Aster DM Healthcare. Sreeni, great to have you with us.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Great. And of course, we've got Genie Yuan. He's the Vice President APAC at Couchbase. Genie, great to have you with us. Welcome to today's discussion.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Sure. Well, we've got a lot of ground to cover today, so let's dive straight into it. Let me start with you, Nehal. To start with, Nehal, if you could tell us, how important is customer data and insights derived from that data to the banking business, and how does IDBI go about leveraging that data?
Customer data and insights are always very important. And from the usage perspective, customer insights are used to help understand customer behavior patterns, the spending patterns, the borrowing patterns, from which region they are borrowing more. Like India is a diverse country, and it will be always interesting to see which region is borrowing more based on the economic policies of that particular state and government regulations. The one important point is that we are one of the oldest bank as well, established in 1960. So there's a lot of data since so many years, which are lying not only in digitalized format, but also in old paper formats, which are to be digitalized or are in the process of getting digitalized. That gives rise to a lot of data sprawl. And since we are also a regulatory body, regulated by RBI, so we have continuous auditing, which is going on by the regulatory body. So that makes us do a lot of management as well as auditing, as well as updation of data continuously, because this audit keeps going on continuously. And in case we have found that we are not upkeeping our data to the mark, then it poses a risk to the bank. So that's one of the compliance risk, a challenge. Another is the security risk. So if we are not in control of all the data which is available in the bank, and in case there is a spillage somewhere or somebody is trying to access unauthorized way, and that also poses a security risk to the bank. And of course, with all this comes the elevated storage cost, because if the data is stored without any accountability in most of the servers, that increases the cost every now and then whenever we want to store more data, again procure more servers. Against that, if we have indexed that data in proper format and have control over it, or even purge it as required, then that saves a cost as well. So
yeah,
I would think to play around this challenge will be to use some automated tools which can identify or do a data discovery within the bank, and also classify this data as per requirement.
Sure. And yes, you brought up a very valid point around operating costs. And that's a point that we will get to in the later part of the discussion. I'm sure a lot of our audience members would want to hear that as well. But let's continue on the point of scale. And Sreeni, let me rope you in for this one. You did point out that, Aster DM Healthcare, in addition to about 20 hospitals, you also have a number of clinics and pharmacies. You're employing over 20,000 people. What are your data sprawl challenges, and how is Aster DM going about it?
Yeah, data sprawl is a very real challenge, Samik. And I echo what Nehal also mentioned that there's a lot of information that's present both in digitized and undigitized or paper or even within digitized form, structured, unstructured, Excel sheets, databases, applications. So it's quite spread. And to add to
Right.
the complexity, as a hospital group and pretty much everywhere in healthcare, you will see that large hospital groups are consolidating, they're acquiring, they are partnering. So you take on hospitals which has very different applications and data structures than yourself. So the challenge of trying to consolidate all of this into a fashion where you can derive insights and use the power of this collected data across all units, across all pharmacies is always a challenge. So that sprawl does present a challenge. Today, not only for Aster DM, but for most of the healthcare groups, there are siloed information across the whole gamut of the application landscape. So, for example, while we have consolidated health information as EMR, electronic medical records in the hospital, much of our information in terms of CRM or customer relationship management would sit somewhere else. The feedback application might be sitting somewhere else. The
Right.
backend would be on Oracle or SAP or on a different system. So that itself, in terms, there's a technology sprawl. Then there is also geography sprawl because these are in different hospitals in different parts of the country, in different databases perhaps, and in different kind of systems. So yes, that is very much a problem. We also face challenges in terms of data from systems that we changed over to. So,
I see.
for example, if we were using a certain hospital information system 3 years ago, and we took a step to consolidate to a newer application, and then you have old data sitting somewhere else in a different format. And again, those we need to access, because if you are trying to do predictions based on patient data, we need to have completeness of that data. That data is sitting across different databases, across different applications over a period of time. And of course, then we always end up having this problem of duplication of data. I think Nehal also touched upon
Exactly.
that. If we want to run an analytics tool and do some kind of BI reporting, that tool will again need its own data source. And then you duplicate some of our information into that. And something else comes along and says that we want to do an AI tool in order to predict the success of liver transplants, for example. And then you need to
Okay.
take part of the data set somewhere else to do that prediction. So you end up creating these data sources which are spread over time, over geography, over applications. And that is the challenge we face today.
Got it, Sreeni. Now I can see Genie smiling and nodding to a lot of the points that you actually uh, brought in front of us today, and I'm going to rope in Genie into the conversation in just a bit. But again, let me quickly get back to Nehal. We've been hearing a lot of concern from IT leaders around data poisoning and data hallucination. What's your take on this, Nehal? What's the kind of impact you foresee on AI and data analytics from a banking standpoint?
Okay, so you must have always heard data is a new oil. Even our prime minister told once. I'll just add something to that. Data is a new oil only if put to use effectively. Otherwise, it's just something sitting somewhere if not put to use properly. It's synonymous to what if the petrol in your car is adulterated? What will happen? It will break down the engine. It will malfunction the engine, right? So that's exactly what will happen if data is poisoned or hallucinated.
It's like
The AI models will give wrong outcomes, and that will lead to wrong decisions, and the wrong decisions is highly risky for the bank in terms of, in case, let's take an example of credit underwriting. And if I have an AI model which is depending on the data of the customer, which I'm getting from outside, and let's say that data is some way poisoned, so the decisions which will come out of that credit underwriting will be something very different than what it should have been. And the bank may end up giving loan to someone who may not be eligible, right?
Exactly.
So that's a big financial challenge, reputation challenge, security risk as well. So
Yeah,
the
that was
impact is
good.
enormous.
Yeah.
My mouth.
Absolutely. I mean, you give a good example there. It's like almost pouring crude petroleum into your fuel tank if your data is not clean enough. Let's get it from a healthcare standpoint. And Sreeni, if you could give us the picture for that, please. I'm sure even you're concerned about data poisoning, data hallucination. Tell us what's the impact specifically for the healthcare domain.
Yeah. No, we are quite concerned about that. And when we want to adopt AI, I personally am I'm not a big fan of jumping into the bandwagon because it is very, very prevalent in the industry. There is a lot of talk, hype around AI. But when I look at healthcare as an organization, the consequence of not applying something correctly is loss of life. And therefore, for me, I have to be very, very sure before we start bringing in these into the mainstream for patient care. Now, having said that, two things, right? You mentioned either hallucination or poisoning, and both of these are real challenges, and both of these are real threats. So, from a hallucination perspective, it could be because the right data is not fed into the system, or maybe the algorithms are wrong, or the way it trains is wrong, right? Because a lot of the AI applications that we use, most of them are sourced from third-party vendors.
Right.
Some we develop in-house. We have an AI lab, and some we develop in-house. But again, we cannot develop everything. So the AI itself being a black box, we are not entirely sure of the outcome that it produces. So there are a lot of measures that we take in terms of auditing, testing, validating, human oversight from an AI hallucination perspective. But that's a real threat, and we need to ensure that we put in those process and procedures to address those. Data poisoning again is a very real problem for us, and more than malicious intent, I think it's also because if I look at past data that we have collected 5 years ago, 6 years ago, not all of it is accurate. And sometimes it is digitized from paper format, and there are some mistakes during digitization. Sometimes, even today, when patients walk into the hospital, the front desk might key in a wrong phone number, a different address, and such. So when you start using that data and making predictions, assessments based on that, you might end up getting wrong results. So both of these are important things: clean data, accurate data for training, and ensuring that the right algorithms are used, and you audit the outcome with human oversight. So that's something that we do to ensure that these are addressed.
Understood. Thank you for sharing that picture with us, Genie. And I'd like to get Genie into the conversation now. So, Genie, you've heard these two discussion points, one from a healthcare domain, one from a banking perspective, and they're both very, very serious challenges with huge repercussions. We've been hearing from primary school garbage in equals garbage out, and that's the same thing that we are seeing with data poisoning and hallucination. So, given the concerns that our IT leaders here shared, what best practices would you recommend to our audience to help avoid data poisoning and hallucination?
Yeah, first of all, I'm really glad to actually validating a lot of what we talked about day in, day out with, the IT professional that sits in both banking and healthcare industry, right? So this is something that comes up all the time during our conversation with our internal as well as with our partner and our customers. So it's very interesting. You actually highlight a couple of very interesting conversation around personalization, and one is about privacy, right? So obviously see the trend going that way, but you have concern on certain parts. Now let's talk about AI for a second. If I may just take a step back, all right? I think just make sure that everyone is on the same page about what Gen AI does. If I may give a metaphor about Gen AI is like a very, very talkative friend of yours, all right? They may not necessarily have a professional healthcare training, and they are not a banking professional, okay? Even though we love talking to them, but if you actually get into some challenges into your health, all right, or you need professional advice on your financial situation, you're probably having questions in your mind about what they are telling you. This is what we call hallucination in this case, all right? Even though everything that he said makes perfect sense, but because of the fact that he's not professional trained, it may actually lead to misdirection or giving you false information that cause serious impact. Okay.
Right.
Now, poison is different. Poison is in a sense that I think this is a concept and challenge that we actually see a while back. All right. Even back to the days of data analytics, you mentioned about crab in, crab out. All right. We need data governance about making sure the data comes in clean, we cleanse it, we put business rule, we standardize, etc., right? That doesn't change. But the problem actually gets worse when we actually jump into, the AI era with the hallucination. It kind of like messed up.
Right.
So let me get back to the question you asked, right? What can we do about it? Now, going down, without going down to very specific technical jargon, obviously we have like, RAG, retrieval augmented generation, and some of those techniques that help with hallucination. I'm not going to deep dive into that. There are many techniques out there to help. What I would like to share on the other side is a couple of very interesting observations along this journey. Number one is what I call a best-in-class versus time to market. What does that mean? So both Nehal and Sreeni actually share about, the challenge about, I have this data sitting here and there when I actually need apply a different function. For example, it could be a search, it could be some kind of analytics. I have to bring in another technology. I have to integrate the best-in-class technology at that point in time. And I have to, before I go to production, considering and worry about consistency on high availability, scalability, and all that. Okay.
Right.
Versus now when we get into the AI era, we sure need to integrate with another technology. It's the same challenge you're facing. But now, what is the outcome that we want? No one can tell, right? The iterative approach, the minimal viable product approach, the lean approach become essentially important for everyone. Can we afford the time to go down to do all of those infrastructure change without knowing what's going down? Okay. The other interesting observation was centralized versus edge. What does that mean? Imagine that someone builds a perfect AI application tomorrow, adaptive AI application tomorrow. Everyone wants to jump in, whether it's in the healthcare or the banking. Okay, what happened? Everyone wants to use it. All right, everyone start asking questions and interacting with it. Say you have 1 million in India, like 10 million customers. Easy, right? Each of them have 100 transaction or interaction with you. Straight away, you have 10 million times 100 interaction that come across the network. Your network suffer immediately.
Right.
Then you think about your centralized AI engine. And NVIDIA will be very, very happy to take all of those money you put in. All right. Before you realizing what is the value that you're providing and what is the commercial benefit you're providing to the customer. Those two things are not equal. Right? You have a huge infrastructure burnout before you actually say, oh, I'm just providing better experience. How much does that cost? Right? Now, I do believe that the future alliance with AI sits at the edge because the interaction happen at the edge. What if I'm telling you, which I'm not bluffing, if you read the news right now, all the phone manufacturing, Apple, Samsung, you name it, start putting small, which is computable large language model at the edge, right? But in order to personalize it, which is a very key words that everyone mentioned, you need what we call a vector database, right? You need a vector database that works at the edge. So you actually take care of 90 to 95 the interaction before you actually leave the 5%. Not only helps with the network, but more importantly, help with your data privacy, right? Instead of sending through all of those credentials, sending through all of those information across the network, what you need to do now is sending a secure token or sending the next best offer advertisement or, offer ID through the network, where all of those PII information stays with the patient, stay with the customer at the edge. The bank is able to provide the next best offer without knowing exactly what, all the parameters. So in this case, the customer feel a lot more comfortable. The patient in this case feel a lot more comfortable. Yes, there are certain things that if they authorize, they will go. They still need to go because Sreeni says that we need to see the history. Sure, if it authorized, it have to go. But if I don't authorize, I still want to receive something. The AI engine at the edge can compute and find out the best offer, and then only send out the IDs or some security token across the network. That will actually help, right, to protect the privacy at the same time, get all of those smart from AI coming across. Last but not least, if I may, I know I'm waffling a little bit, but
You're covering a lot of ground here, so please, absolutely, go ahead.
Thank you. So last but not least, production with unknown. So like Sreeni rightly point out, right? How do I know how good is good? How do I know I can trust AI to do A, B, C, and X, Y, Z? We don't. So if you go into production today, I think IT department will put their hands up and say, yeah, we're good. But then your risk and compliance say, okay, hold on a second. What do you mean by good? How good is good? How safe is safe? We are actually dealing with unknown quantity. But again, the AI at the edge will help you to best protect a lot of unknown, and that actually sits safely with your customer, with your end user. Only the known quantity that we're dealing with today will be sent across. All right. This will significantly help us to reduce the barrier of compliance to make sure that we can actually go across easily. Okay. So I leave everyone with 3 thoughts, but alongside, there are many techniques like what I mentioned, the RAG and all of those will help to, facilitate to remove some of the hallucination parts, which again, if anyone interested, we can deep dive into that a little bit more at a later stage. But I thought most of the audience today will be a lot more interested to hear about the journey and the observation rather than specific technical aspect of it. I hope that makes sense.